Chris Delia is one of those characters that you meet, and within a few minutes of observing him, you have the sudden realization of just why he has amassed the following that he has. In this same realization, it simultaneously appears to us that he has something a majority of people do not. And we realize that it is precisely this quality that draws people toward him. So what is this thing? What is this elusive nebulous that magnetizes people toward him and makes him the entertainer that he is? The first line of thought is, well, he's funny. He has his following because he is hysterical, which is true, but something deeper is at play here. People are not drawn to Chris just because he is one-dimensionally funny, like many other comics, but because most of his humor is subconsciously derived from his philosophy and the way he lives his life. Going a step deeper, a lot of what makes him hysterical is that, in a reductive sense, he is psychologically free. The archetype that Chris Delia inhabits makes up an esoteric minority of our population, and the people that exhibit this archetype invariably build a great following and are successful in whatever field they choose.
Baby, I know what it is now, dude!
This archetype is generally quite easy to spot. When these sorts of people make movements and actions, it seems as if they are moving with a force that is greater than their own physical finitude. It appears as if they are moving with an energy that is more powerful and capable than that of the average person, and exhibit a confidence that succeeds that of mortal body. So what exactly is at play here? Using the writings of the 19th century Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, with Chris Delia as a catalyst for his revelations, this video is going to show you just how Chris Delia consistently reaches psychological freedom. And I'm going to teach you how to live in and exhibit this magnetic archetype if you so choose to have the courage. The writing that will be referenced is Kierkegaard's highly revered Fear and Trembling, which is a discussion of the controversial biblical story of God ordering Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. The most prominent question asked of Kierkegaard is, why would an all-righteous deity demand such a brutal and unforgiving sacrifice when the act itself seemingly serves no use other than to appease God's orders? Determined to find compassion and nobility in what is seemingly a godless request, Kierkegaard eventually finds it. Our first level to the breakdown of Chris Delia's philosophy is the reaction to stimulus. Isaac is Abraham's son. In Isaac lies Abraham's hope of passing down and continuing his genetic line. And because of this, Isaac is essentially Abraham's entire world. But Abraham showed no sign of sorrow or lament. He did not cry and he did not weep when any other normal person would have. This just doesn't make sense. Not yet. So how does this relate to Chris? When a vast majority of people consistently and continually have a certain reaction to a stimulus, over time, it becomes the normal and expected reaction. The reaction that Chris Delia has is to the stimulus of life. Somehow he is able to find this extravagant happiness and have these effusively creative reactions to the stimulus of life.
Alive reps!
And since his reactions to this stimulus completely contradict what has come to be the dull, consumeristic, expected reaction, it is absurd that the things he enthuses over should have the values that he ascribes to them. Making a note on human nature, Kierkegaard claims, "It is only human to sorrow with the sorrower, and humans resort to sorrow because the expectations of sorrow never deceive us as the expectations of life so often do." Essentially, it is a lot easier to go down than it is up. And since it is only human to sorrow with the sorrower, how is it possible for someone to have consistently effusive and extravagant contrarian reactions to a stimulus with no degradation over time? You would have to have the belief in the absurd, the impossible. But what exactly is it? How do you maintain it? And how can you inhabit it? It starts with faith, but Kierkegaard shows us that there is a hidden structural complexity. In order to reach faith, Kierkegaard deduces that you cannot have the belief in the absurd unless you first have something titled infinite resignation. Infinite resignation is described as the full-hearted renunciation of something very important to you. And it is only in infinite resignation can the eternal validity for someone's desires be completely valid to the individual person, as well as those around him. Infinite resignation is most easily externally noticed by the complete lack of insecurity and the unflinching confidence and comfort flowing through whoever possesses it. The lack of infinite resignation is noticed through any sign of insecurity or any action that makes you question that person's confidence or disposition. In order to be absolutely certain in what you are believing in, infinite resignation is a necessary precedent to having the belief in the absurd. So Abe clearly resigns his son, his world. But importantly, what does Chris D'Elia infinitely resign to achieve this psychological freedom?
All I want to do is like have fun and around. Like I don't care about anything but like laughing. And like when I'm with my buddies, like that's what I want to do. And then I was like, I just always imagined I would be in front of people making them laugh.
One of Chris's most prominent desires before becoming a comedian was to be socially accepted and to just be funny. So before believing that he can truly be this way, what he fully renounces is the need to be accepted socially in any form. What I'm about to show is an excerpt from episode 149 of Chris D'Elia's podcast, Congratulations, which shows an irrefutable example of Chris D'Elia actively practicing infinite resignation.
I'm not doing it for you, okay? And because of that, let me even go. Even 1%, I'm not doing it for you. You know how much I'm doing it for you? Zilch, okay?
Chris needs a viewership to survive as a comedian, but he has the belief in the absurd that people will be drawn to him precisely for the reason that he has the strength to fully be himself, void from any potentially dulling external influences. In faith arises a paradox, that on one hand this contains the expression of extreme egoism, doing something for only his benefit, but on the other hand lies the expression of the most absolute devotion to his audience.
You know what that means? Because I'm doing it for me, Hunnit. Do you know what it means? Because I'm doing it for me, Hunnit. Do you know what that means? That I'm not doing it 1% for you. That it's for you. That's what that means.
Abraham prepares to kill Isaac, with the impossible belief that he will be able to see and love him again in flesh. As a comedian, Chris hands over what his career relies on, which is essentially his whole world. He hands over the need to be socially accepted in full faith that people will be drawn towards him and he will be socially accepted in the highest form, precisely because he had the courage to renounce it fully and let it come back to him on the strength of the absurd. People are unflinchingly attracted to this energy because it is the display and exhibition of an individual act of courage and strength that was previously thought impossible by people whose inspirations were dulled. Because of this, the ones that have the courage to believe in the absurd become a beacon of light and immense influence for those that previously thought this level of courage impossible.
Because I'm inspirational, man. I'm inspirational, dude. I can't help it.
Inhabiting this archetype exhibits the highest level of spiritual courage one can have. But this is not to say that others cannot be great. Kierkegaard explains that each man's greatness directly corresponds with his expectations. They shall all be remembered, but everyone became great in proportion to his expectancy. One became great through expecting the possible, another by expecting the eternal. But he who expected the impossible became greater than all. People can become respected and admired through pursuing artless pursuits, but they will never have the indissoluble influence that the belief in the absurd has in any career or occupation. It is one thing to be admired, but another to be a guiding light that saves the anguished. I use Chris D'Elia as an example to show that anyone can inhabit this archetype. Just because Chris's absurdity is concentrated into a specific field does not take away from the fact that he is inhabiting this archetype to its potential. And yet he is no genius. I have tried in vain to spy out in him the incommensurability of the genius, and yet he is continually making the movement to infinity. But he makes it with such accuracy and poise that he is continually getting finitude out of it, and not for a second would one suspect anything else. The great news about archetypes is that people are fluid, inhabiting different archetypes at different points in our lives. This means that just as Abraham and Chris have, you too can inhabit this archetype. What do I think Kierkegaard's advice would be? That if one is really to learn something from the great, it is precisely the beginning one must attend to. If anyone on the verge of action should judge himself according to the outcome, he would never begin. The moment that you full-heartedly renounce what you tangibly desire, in full faith that it will return to you perpetually on the strength of the absurd, that is the true moment of faith. With your eternal validity confirmed within your infinite resignation, faith is then not just a contemplation of the possibility, but to accept and expect the absurd to happen. It is utterly impossible to articulate your limitless potential for influence when believing in the absurd because faith begins precisely where thinking leaves off. There was he who conquered many tangible things by his own strength, and he who conquered everything by his powerlessness. My name's Delia. Thank you so much. Dude, if you like this